Welcome everyone to the Unboxing Careers podcast, where we shed light on what different careers are really like so that you can choose a career you will really love. Today we dive into marine biology with Sara Stevens, but before we do, let's talk briefly about unboxing thoughtful gifts. At thoughtfulcollection.com, you can shop from a wide selection of curated products you can feel good about, helping you express friendship, gratitude, and love. The next time you need to, don't just gift, give thoughtfully at thoughtfulcollection.com. All right, I'd like to welcome to the show Sara Stevens, marine biologist and director of animal collections at Butterfly Pavilion. Sara, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is going to be fun. So my youngest son wants to be a marine biologist. He wants to swim with the sharks. So I know this is not your area of expertise, but if you can, he's 10, if you can get him into the right direction, I'd appreciate it. So this is going to be a fun episode for me because I have ulterior motives here. So Sara, let's start with this. Mention your current role. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your current role, do a little level setting, tell us a little bit about Butterfly Pavilion and what the organization does.
Absolutely. So I work at Butterfly Pavilion, which is an AZA accredited standalone invertebrate zoo. So we care for animals that don't have that backbone, which is about 97% of all animal species on Earth. So very wide, very diverse, but often very underappreciated for the amount of legwork they do in our environment and ecosystems. When I first started at Butterfly Pavilion, my background as a marine biologist, I started there as their aquarist. So I took care of all of our aquatic animal collections. And then over the years, grew to love some of the creepy crawlies a lot more and have transitioned into my role as director, where I get to oversee everybody.
So what is the kind of breakdown of like how many aquatic things you have there versus just non-aquatic invertebrate, if you will?
I would say our aquatic animals take up probably 15 to 20% of our animal collections. We do have things like ants and bees, which help weight it pretty heavily in our terrestrial entomology collection's favor. But we do some coral conservation work, which allows us to have a little bit more of that research and conservation footprint within our animal collections.
Excellent. And I kind of relate marine biologists a little bit to engineers, right? You see a lot of engineers go into education side. So they're teachers and they're doing research while they're, as a professor involved in this. I see a lot of marine biologists kind of do the same thing. They're lecturing, they're doing research on the side, they're taking trips to do certain things. I want to get into a little bit of your specific concentration in marine biology, why that was appealing to you, and kind of walk through a typical career path of a marine biologist. And we can certainly use you as the example here, but let's start with your background. So what was your concentration and why was that appealing to you?
Yeah, so my background, growing up, my dad always had a fish tank in our house. And so I like to think that that was a integral part of my childhood and really what set the stage for me wanting to become a marine biologist. He was a scuba diver, and when I was a kid, I got the opportunity to go scuba diving with him, and it changed my entire career path. Up until that point, I wanted to be a veterinarian. And instead, I got to dive down into the ocean and had this transformative experience where I wanted to be with these animals and protect these animals and these ecosystems because it was just so impactful and awe-inspiring. So I was very fortunate that I had incredibly supportive parents, and my dad was helping me find local universities that had marine biology programs. I actually ended up going to school in a landlocked state. I went to Millersville in Pennsylvania, which had a wonderful marine biology and oceanography program. They still do. And I was given the opportunity to go do field work down in the Chesapeake Bay during the summers. So it was a really cool degree for me. My actual degree is a Bachelor of Science in Biology with an option in marine biology.
So we went scuba diving. How old were you then?
I was 15, I think, or 16. I was out in Hawaii, so it was a very privileged, wonderful opportunity getting to see some of the most incredible, pristine habitat, but it really was transformative.
Okay, so up until I guess early to mid high school, you're thinking vet, and then you do these experiences and you're like, oh, ocean's where I'm going to be here. All right, so that's good to know. And then you mentioned you were doing some work at the Chesapeake Bay area. So can you tell us a little bit about what type of work that generally involved?
Yeah, so I was doing school courses down there. It was the Marine Science Consortium at the time, but now I believe it is the Chesapeake Bay Field Station. It's located near Chesapeake or Chincoteague and Assateague Island in Virginia. And we were able to do a variety of things. So I was able to do fish work in an ichthyology class. I was able to do marine invertebrate work, which I found that I really had a passion for and a love for those kind of weird, diverse critters. And everything from looking at beach profiling, so walking across coastal dunes and doing work with them, to being out for long days on boats, doing long lining for sharks. It gave me a really wide net of experiences to really start to dial down and dial into what specific area of kind of expertise I maybe wanted to go into. I think that's important when it comes to marine biology. It's very diverse. There's tons you can
Yeah.
do with it. There's so many animals that call the ocean home, and there's so many different touch points to the ocean that there is a wonderful opportunity to go a little bit deeper and delve past maybe the most instantly eye-catching things like working with dolphins or cetaceans or working with sharks. There's so many cool, incredible animals and so much opportunity to discover and explore if you're willing to go off the beaten path a little bit.
So your specialty, what about it? Like, what about it did you love? Right. So is it that they look a little funky? Is it, do they function differently that you gravitate to it? Like, why invertebrates?
Yeah, I think the thing with invertebrates is they just don't get the love that I think they deserve. And something about that resonated with me, that you just have this weird group of animals that is so complex, so diverse, does so much for the world, and so many people know so little about them. Even looking at coral, which is probably one of the sexier marine invertebrates, if you will, when it comes to conservation efforts, so many people don't even realize that those are animals. They think they're plants or pretty rocks, but they're colonies of thousands of animals, and they've been around for thousands of years. And that's just getting to educate people about that and getting to help protect those animals so that future generations can have them and appreciate the wonder and awe is just hit me at my core.
Do you have a T-shirt that says "Invertebrates need love" too?
I don't, but I should. I should
You
get
should
our gift
probably get
shop
one.
to make those.
Oh, there you go. You're on it. All right. So you mentioned there's a lot of different things you could do with a career as a marine biologist. You also mentioned you got a BS in biology and then a
Mhm.
specialty in or concentration in marine biology. Could you walk us through a little bit? I know this is going to vary, so the answer you can kind of hone it down to something that makes sense for you. But I want to ask about like a typical career path for a marine biologist. Do you normally you get the BS in biology or biology specific degree and then have a concentration? Are there dedicated programs? And then what's that first job or two typically look like for someone?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, something that I recommend pretty heavily when it comes to marine biology, it is a science field. So, usually there is a recommendation to go through some sort of higher education program. Now, that could be a bachelor's. There are some wonderful associate and training programs for if you wanted to do husbandry, or if you wanted to go more hands-on in like the zoo aquarium field. There's even some high schools that have marine biology programs. Central Campus in Des Moines, Iowa has a wonderful marine biology program for their high school students to get kind of a taste of if that's a professional career they want to go into. I'm a big believer in practical experience. So, using summers when you're in school or going for these degrees to do internships if you have the capability to do so. And if you don't have the ability to financially make an internship work, trying to find jobs in fields that in the field or adjacent to the field where you can still get a flavor for what that work might look like. I had the opportunity to work at a local pet store in the fish room side, and that really gave me a lot of experience of how to care for these animals, which is critical whether you're going into a zoo field or if you're going into a research field, because a lot of times to study animals, you have to keep them alive. I also did an internship down at Moat Marine at their aquaculture park. So that gave me some opportunity to try a completely different area of marine biology I hadn't realized I could or would be interested in. And I really actually only went for that particular route because I thought less people were going to be interested in it. So it increased my chance of getting that internship and getting a foot in the door. It's a big field, but it's also small in a lot of ways. So anytime you can get a foot in the door and start working with individuals in the field is going to be incredibly important.
Is it a really is it a hyper competitive field, or do you find that, I mean, I work in a field that it's huge, but everyone knows each other, right? It's like kind of like you said, it's a small, we all know each other. We're like, oh yeah, I know. So is it hyper competitive, or are there enough jobs kind of go around based on specialty?
I would say that there is pre-COVID, it was incredibly competitive, particularly those fields with the really charismatic animals. So working with whales, dolphins, sharks, it was going to be incredibly competitive, and the pay wasn't great. Since COVID, at least in the zoo and aquarium world, there was a lot of loss of skill and people leaving. So there's been a lot more openings and opportunities for people to get a foot in the door in those entry level positions. That being said, it is competitive. Even the aquaculture internship I went for that I thought nobody would apply for had 40 other applicants for it. So there is a level of competitiveness. So any way you can find to make yourself stand out, so trying to get that real world applicable experience is going to be important. So asking professors if you can work with them in their labs, being willing to do those kind of dirty jobs that other people don't want to do is critical to getting a foot in the door. In college, I cleaned 5,000 seashells in a museum collection just to get a foot in the door with my professor. It entailed just rubbing baby oil to help rehydrate the shells. And I spent a whole semester doing that. But when she had a position open up in her lab, she knew I was willing to do the not so fun work and therefore offered me the opportunity to do some of the more interesting work.
Now, did you go into that knowing it was 5,000 shells, or was it, hey, you're going to clean some shells, it's going to take you a while, and then you realize
I think I knew that there was going to be a large scope, but I don't think I ever anticipated it would take me a whole semester to go in and just be sitting there rubbing these seashells. I got through quite a few audiobooks, so use the time well.
There you go.
But it really, pretty much every kid in the class was raising their hands, offering that they wanted to do it. I was the only one who followed up. So it really is important to take every opportunity. It may not be fun. It may take you away some of the more interesting things in like day-to-day life, but you're building that foundation so that you are more competitive later on. And I really think that helped attribute to a lot of my personal success, is really jumping on those opportunities as they arose.
Excellent. This seems to be a common theme with a lot of people. Like it's funny, when I went to college, I just assumed between this year and this year, you do an internship, and that's your internship, and then you're off graduating and stuff like that. And we have multiple people coming on this podcast saying, hey, you should do multiple internships if you can, right? And get those opportunities. It never even occurred to me you could do more than one. So I think your advice is spot on. It's in line with other people as well. So I want to talk specifically about you, Sara. So looking at your current job, walk us through like what a typical week looks like for you.
For me now in my role, a lot more meetings than you'd probably expect as I oversee an animal care team. Lots of work on new exhibits or looking at our current husbandry strategies with my different kind of managers of collections. When I was the aquarist, my day was much more animal care heavy. So I would get in at 7. I have 2 hours of just concentrated work on our exhibits. And then the rest of my day would be working with animals behind the scenes, working on things that would be impactful to the general public, figuring out what new animals do we need to bring in, what changes or tweaks we need to make to make their lives better. Because that's a big thing about being AZA accredited is really the welfare of our animals and ensuring new and exciting ways to make their lives fulfilling and make sure they're kind of living the best quality of life they can possibly live. But yeah, as a director, overseeing stuff is a lot of people management, less animal management.
Is that, I don't want to say, is that appealing to you, but do you wish you had more of the other still in your day to day, or do you like the kind of the trade off at the place you're at?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, I love the husbandry side, and whenever I do need to kind of get my hands wet to get back into it, I have the opportunity to make some time to do so and help my team. But I really love removing barriers for
Yeah.
my animal care team. I love to be able to let them be as passionate as possible about the work that they do and remove any barriers to that, help them be able to do their jobs better or easier or more efficiently. So for me, it is really fulfilling, even though it has taken me further away from the animals. And I do still get to do coral conservation work and get to travel for that. So I still get to get my toes wet a little bit here or there. And that's enough for me and allows me to do marine biology in a state that is very landlocked.
There you go. And so you kind of led into what my next question was going to be is, one, do you still do any sort of either research or expeditions of things like that? You just mentioned you did some, but I want to, if you could just give us a little context in that. Do you do dedicated research? And if not, do you have the opportunity to, and your time is just constricted? Walk us through kind of what that looks like a little bit, if you could.
Yeah, so I do a lot of work with Caribbean coral. So Florida Reef Tract is one of the largest kind of continuous reefs on the continental United States. So it's a really important, impactful reef. And over the last several years, since about 2014, it's been unbelievably impacted by this kind of unprecedented disease called stony coral tissue loss disease. Very dangerous, deadly disease for these coral, impacts a very large number of reef building coral. And so in 2018, the Florida government and NOAA reached out to AZA and asked for help, that they needed to triage coral out of the ocean as quickly as possible and put them places. It was all volunteer based, and our institution signed on. We were one of 22 institutions to sign on. And in 2020, February of 2020, a month before we closed down for COVID, we received our coral. So I've been able to do a lot of work with holding these coral, which will one day be parents of coral that'll go back into the ocean. They're going to be crossbreeding those coral with coral that have survived the disease to hopefully create offspring that are resilient enough to survive the outplanting. That work has given me a lot of opportunity to do educational outreach, to help support what that restoration pathway may look like with AZA supporting FWC and NOAA. And I now get the opportunity to go support training for new aquarists who are taking care of these coral through the Coral Aquarist program. So training the next generation of aquarists on how to care for these rather unique species. That's most of my marine biology work that I get to do. I do get to do some freshwater work with dragonfly species, which is a little bit more of a rigorous research-based project. It's working on head starting and caring for species of concern of dragonflies in subalpine regions of Colorado.
Is it pretty common, or is it almost, I don't say kind of across the board, but is it more common than not that a marine biologist, regardless of their position, landlocked, ocean, whatever, is always involved in some sort of research or some sort of other project other than kind of their day-to-day job, unless their day-to-day job is obviously research and things like that. But
I would say
is it pretty common that people are doing multiple things?
I think definitely yes. Being a marine biologist is kind of juggling a lot of things. Just within caring for animals in an aquarium, you're utilizing biology, chemistry, engineering. So there's so much that is constantly going into caring for these animals just in an aquarium that you kind of have to have a mindset to kind of be juggling multiple things at any given time. when it comes to the kind of type of marine biologist that I am working within a zoo and aquarium field, I would say it's predominantly husbandry with research and conservation side projects. For academics or people who are on the front lines doing field work, it probably pulls much more heavily into the research and conservation work.
Wonderful. And you mentioned a couple things already. You can repeat the answer if you want to. What do you like most about your work?
The work I've been able to do with the Florida reef track coral has probably been my favorite project overall to work on. It's something that is very near and dear to my heart. I got my open ocean scuba certification down in the Florida Keys. I grew up visiting my grandparents and going to beaches in Florida. That work and getting to help raise awareness about that coral and getting to actively see the impact of my work, even if it's not great, even if it's not good news, it's still feeling like I'm at least making some sort of difference, even if it's just one grain of sand and an entire beach, it gives me a lot of opportunity to feel like I'm helping something, which is why
Very
it's
nice.
just really meaningful.
That's very nice. How about on the flip side? What do you like least about your career?
Ooh, I I think almost on the same side of that coin is that it feels like a never-ending battle of you're trying to fix this or fix that, and it doesn't always feel like you're making headway. And so there can be a lot of grief that can come with that they talk about it sometimes in the environmental field where you can put in so much energy and work and it feels like it's for nothing because things die or you're fighting this ever-ending avalanche. And so there has to be a level of resiliency to work in this field because it is some of your greatest joys and your lowest lows on a daily basis.
Anything specific you do to kind of manage that, or is it just you have to accept this is the territory you're in and like you take the hits and you keep going? Or are there certain things that you do personally that kind of decompress those things and help you adapt to it better?
Yeah, I think something I had to learn early on was really how to just let go and move on, not forget. I think it's really important you never forget. But in an animal care field, I always like to tell people coming into the field, particularly in aquatics, where you are responsible for so much more than like if you have a dog, right? So if you have a dog, you don't have to make sure the correct percentage of oxygen is in the air for that dog to be able to breathe. But when you're working with aquatic animals, you do to a degree have control over the water chemistry, and that is the entirety of that animal's environment. So it is really easy for something to go wrong. It could be your fault, it could be a malfunction. But I always tell them there is going to be a point in your career where you are directly responsible for the death of an animal based on a choice that you made. And you have to be okay with that. You have to be able to figure out how to move on from that moment and do better the next time and learn and make sure that you don't make that mistake again. And not everybody has that ability to compartmentalize and that resiliency to bounce back from those moments. And I've seen a lot of people after an internship leave the industry because of that. But it's incredibly important.
That's okay. We hear the dog. It animals, right?
I do.
You look stunned
I
there
have
for
some
you look
fuzzy
stunned
animals
for a
that I can
second.
hold. I think he's dreaming
Hey,
right now, actually.
okay. Well, they're all welcome. They're all welcome. So, Sarah, how about some common misconceptions about your field?
uh, some misconceptions about my field, I think, would be that it's all fun and games. You get to do like getting to do lots of cool things with animals and having all of these incredible, amazing experiences. Uh, it's really gross sometimes. Marine animals are not they're oh man, when they create some really gross byproducts, and whether living or dead, you're going to smell some of the weirdest smells you've ever smelled. It's a very stinky field, if that makes
Okay.
sense. And when it comes to animal care, we joke 90% of it's probably cleaning, and maybe 5% is cool, amazing animal experiences. And usually those 5% opportunities still outweigh the 95% like
Good.
cleaning stuff up. But it's so much scrubbing and maintenance and gross textures and smells and, crawling into weird dusty places because you have plumbing there and you have to fix it. So it's a lot grosser, I think, than people realize.
Is there one specific thing you can think of that you know immediately that is the worst smelling thing ever? Like, is there a certain animal or fish or something that produces that worst one?
Yeah, for me, it's dead snail is really gnarly. Dead snail or dead anemone. But I've heard from other people in the field that probably the single worst smell is dead marine mammal or dead sea turtle.
Okay.
Those are apparently very, very potent in their odor. And it is kind of an odor that just like sticks in your nose in a
Wow.
really bad way.
Very good. Very good. You mentioned a couple of things already as far as get involved with internships, do things like that, try to kind of explore a little bit, reach out to local things. I'm going to apply this question to both high school and college because sometimes the advice is exactly the same. Sometimes they're separated. So I'll let you decide how you want to answer it. But advice for students at any level that either think they may want to go into marine biology or they definitely know they want to go into marine biology to for what they could work on now or things they could explore now that would set them up for either success or to give them a better guide like, yep, this is for me, or nope, not for me. I got to choose something else.
Yeah. I think a great entry point for pretty much anybody who's interested in marine biology is just setting up a small fish tank in your house if you have the ability or capacity to do that, because it gives you a really good feel on a very small level of what some of these aquatic ecosystems entail. So, caring for animals is really important when you're in academia or when you're in the zoo or aquarium field, or even when you're just out on a boat doing some research. You have to be able to keep that animal alive. For most research, not all research, but most research. So, that is a great opportunity to learn some of those really basic principles of the nitrogen cycle and water chemistry, things that will give you a foundation that you may not get in a lot of your university or your like high school classes. So it's something that is a really meaningful skill set, and it could also end up helping you leverage that into a job at a local fish store. It's a great way to get experience, learn about a lot of animals, still make some money, which is incredibly important, and still be learning those foundational things that will help you in a marine biology field. On top of that, really looking into universities and looking into the professors themselves. Is there a professor that has a specialty that you're really excited about? And, you can even try and email that professor and have some questions. Or if not, going to a school specifically for a professor who has a specialty you're interested in can really help you get a foot in the door in that field. I also recommend, if you have the ability to, volunteer. A lot of high school students may not be able to volunteer on the animal care side, but they can volunteer on the education side usually. And that still gives you those contact points with animal caretakers or with those animals that you're interested in. And you'll start to pick up those nuggets of knowledge that are really important. And yeah, when you're in school, just take every opportunity you possibly can to interact with these people, get these touch points, go to local career fairs where there might be a marine biologist and talk to them, or local university fairs. I think there's so much out there, and particularly now with the focus on STEM and getting people engaged in STEM. I think there's a lot of opportunities if you're looking for them to talk to people and learn as much as you can.
That's wonderful advice. Sarah, how about something maybe you wish you knew sooner about your industry?
Ooh, uh, I think something I didn't really take into consideration was that early on was how much of a privilege it can be economically to work in this field. Uh, I was very fortunate. I had opportunities open to me due to family. I was able to do my internship down in Florida because my grandparents had a house down there. So I could live with them, and that saved me a lot of cost. And I think there's a lot of movement within the industry to make it more um, accessible to all socioeconomic uh, areas, but it's still an area of privilege. And knowing that you're not going to make a ton of money and you may have to sacrifice. I once worked two jobs because I really wanted to continue working with the animals that I was working with. So I picked up a second job selling cheese, and it was rough working, two jobs. One was full time and one was part time, but it gave me the opportunity to do what I wanted to do until I could get to a place where I didn't need to work two jobs. And that's not for everybody. And knowing that before you put all of your money into a career into that field, I think is really important.
Is that pretty typical for like entry level positions in your field to kind of have to subsidize yourself a little bit? Because it is in a lot of different fields. I mean, I went there, I was doing three jobs at a time after college, right?
Yeah.
Stocking shelves and stuff like that to kind of break in as well. Is it pretty typical for entry level on your side?
I'd say yes. I think that there is a lot of movement trying to help reduce that. However, we're still kind of on the precipice of that really happening in a meaningful way. So there's been more opportunities to have paid internships versus unpaid internships to try and increase that accessibility and equitability. But I would say that there is still a significant level of subsidization for this in the entry level, particularly for positions that are high value or you have a lot of competition. Those seem to be changing more slowly than the positions that are maybe less fun or exciting.
So, and Sarah, how about the most rewarding part of your career?
I think probably one of the most rewarding parts is getting to talk to kind of young people who are interested in becoming marine biologists and getting to encourage them and see them kind of come up in the field. We do a lot of volunteering and internship programs at Butterfly Pavilion to allow opportunities for people to kind of get a taste for what marine biology can be like, as well as some of our other areas of animal care, and getting to see people grow up past that point and tracking their career journeys and where they end up and what they're doing and seeing that they stayed in the field is really rewarding because it's helping to bring in that new generation of marine biologists.
I'm going to hit you up in 10 years for an internship for my son. So
Absolutely.
I'll ping you once a year for 10 years. I'll stay in contact. Before we kind of wrap up here, Sarah, I've got a good marine biologist on this side. I've got a not so good one over here. What do you think separates a not so good from a good one?
Oh, that's a great question. I think attention to detail can be quite important for a marine biologist. There's so much to learn, and you need to have a good memory or a good system for remembering information because it all works together in kind of such weird ways. Um, I think to be a good marine biologist, for me personally, having that flexibility, that ability to kind of roll with the punches. And I've found so much that you know, things that theoretically should work never quite seem to work in marine biology just because there's so many different factors that half of which you can't even measure to take into account. So being able to kind of go, well, I thought this was going to be a solid strategy and it worked for everybody else, but it didn't work for me. Guess I just have to figure something else out. Is critical to just being able to navigate a world that is kind of tough sometimes and likes to prove you wrong. Um, for being, I think also to just having compassion. You're working with animals that maybe everybody doesn't. We hear a lot about, people talking about the intelligence of orcas or the intelligence of dolphins, and less so about maybe the intelligence of a sea star. But we still need to understand that these animals, are animals, and we need to treat them with compassion, and we need to treat them with kind of empathy and respect, even if maybe they don't interact with the world in the same way that we do. So I think compassion is really critical. The ability to compartmentalize and have that resiliency to move past animal loss of life, but to not become desensitized to it. Because I think when you become fully desensitized to it, that moves you into the realm of kind of more of a bad marine biologist, where you no longer respect the animals that you're working with. You no longer respect that loss of life and the sacrifice that is coming from those animals in the name of pursuing knowledge. And it may have to happen. Those animals may need to be sacrificed in the name of scientific discovery. And respecting that is incredibly crucial.
It's a really good answer. Really thoughtful as well. So thank you for that. Sara, what did I neglect to ask you today that you think is important for the audience to know, if anything?
I feel like my favorite animal. It's incredibly important when you're a marine biologist. What's your favorite marine animal?
Okay, what's your favorite one?
One of my favorite marine animals are nautilus. I think they're really incredible. They're a cephalopod, so they're related to octopus, but they're much longer lived than octopus and squid. They are a cephalopod that still has their shell. I remember always being fascinated by them. They're a deep sea animal. It's hard to discover and track them. But they're just, I don't know, they're prehistoric and cool, and we're still learning so much. We're 2 or 3 new species just kind of described recently. So they just, to me, represent kind of all of the wonder and discovery that still exists in the ocean.
Do they look like an octopus or squid? So they've got the tentacles and all that, or are they just
They
part of
have
the same species?
They have tentacles, but they have a curled shell. It's white with brown striping. You've probably seen it and just never realized that it was a nautilus shell. They're a decent size. And so their tentacles kind of stick out from the opening of the shell, and they kind of swim backwards, and they're clumsy and not the smartest cephalopods in the ocean compared to an octopus, but there's something cool about them.
We're not here to judge smarts. We're not. Whereabout are they found? Are they in mid-Atlantic? Are they in the Pacific side? Where would you find those?
So most of the work being done with nautilus is in the Pacific. I'm not sure if there's any Atlantic species, but I do know there are several in the Pacific. And they are deeper sea, so you have to actually set traps that go down into the ocean to be able to do work with them, and then either bring them back up or use cameras to measure their activity. And they hunt in those deep oceans and exist where there's no really landmarks or things like that. So it's really cool.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. All right, Sara, if you had to choose, you take marine world, I'm going to take animals altogether off your plate there, and you've got to choose a different career that you think you'd be happy in. What do you think you would choose?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think if I had to choose a completely different career, I think I would maybe do donor relations for nonprofits, getting to kind of sell that vision and help. I like I said earlier, I really like to remove barriers, and money is a huge barrier when it comes to research and conservation work. And over the years, I've gotten a lot of opportunity to interact with donors, raising money for our own facility. And I think that that's an area where I would still enjoy what I get to do, because I'm helping to give people the opportunity to do amazing work. And again, I get to help remove those barriers.
Excellent. Well, Sara, it was a pleasure having you today. This was fun. I enjoyed it. I'm going to go Google what a nautilus is now. I probably have seen it. I kind of envision what you're talking about. I could be making it up, though. So we'll check it out. So I'm going to ask you, if someone wants to reach out, ask a question, find out more about Butterfly Pavilion, good way to contact you. I do need to ask you, though, are puns required in the biology field or marine biology?
Oh, we do love a good pun. We had an octopus that was named Aninko Montoya. We had a hermit crab that was Leonardo da Vinci. So puns definitely go a long way in helping to build connection. So I do recommend them if you don't dabble, to at least get a couple in the books for yourself.
The reason I asked was, went to your Instagram page and
Oh,
your name was a pun on there. But I've looked at probably 50 other marine biologists' Instagram pages or Twitter handles, and they're all puns, right? All of them. And I'm like, I think I would like this field. So, long way to say, Sarah, if someone wants to reach out, ask you a question, find out more about your organization, what are some good ways for them to get a hold of you?
Yep. So if you want to learn about the organization, www.butterflies.org is where you can learn more about Butterfly Pavilion and the work that we do with invertebrates. For myself personally, if you are interested in reaching out to me, my email is sstevens, STEVENS, @butterflies.org. And you're welcome to reach out to me there. I may not be able to get back to you right away, but I will do my best to get back to anybody who emails me.
Wonderful. We'll link those in the show notes. Show notes will probably hash the email so you don't get spammed by bots and stuff like that, but you can find it on our website as well. So Sara Stevens, everyone, marine biologist and director of animal collections at Butterfly Pavilion. Hope you learned something today. I did. Be sure to like, rate, and review the podcast if you will. If you want to explore other careers or share your career with us, check out our website to find out more. Until next time, be kind to one another.